The contract was supposed to be simple. A Korean Mafia king marries a Jamaican stranger to neutralize threats and avoid political entanglements. 6 months. No emotions. No complications. But on their wedding night, Changmin Lee discovers a truth that stops him cold. His bride has never been touched by any man. Her terror freezes him. His restraint shocks them both. And in that moment of mercy, a ruthless king begins to fall for the one woman who was never supposed to matter. Before we dive into this story, do me a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button and comment below where you're watching from. My friend said I'd never reach 5,000 subscribers. Let's prove them wrong together. Now, let's begin. The contract was not a promise. It was a shield. Changmin Lee signed his name at the bottom with the same cold precision he used to authorize weapons, shipments, and territory acquisitions. The ink was dark, final, irreversible. He was a man who built an empire on fear and blood. A king in a world where mercy was weakness and hesitation meant death. To secure his throne after an assassination attempt that left 3 of his men dead, his advisors insisted he needed a wife. Not just any wife, a foreign one. Someone whose identity kept her outside the tangled web of Korean political alliances and family vendettas. Neutral, uncorrupted, unconnected. It was purely strategic, a calculated merger. He imagined the woman on the other side of this arrangement would be sharp, experienced, maybe even cynical, someone who understood the brutal mathematics of survival in his world. He expected a partner in pretense, not a person. The day she arrived, the atmosphere in his glass-walled penthouse shifted. Keisha Robinson did not stride in with confidence. She was escorted, a silent figure in a simple ivory wedding gown that seemed too delicate for the harsh Seoul skyline stretching behind her. Changmin watched from his study overlooking the city, his dark eyes narrowing as she stepped into the foyer below. She was smaller than he had pictured. Her shoulders curved inward as if she were trying to fold into herself and disappear. Her hair, thick, natural curls, the color of warm earth, was pulled half back, revealing a face that was beautiful in a way that felt dangerous to notice. There was no boldness in her posture, only a trembling stillness that set every instinct in him on high alert. This was not what he had negotiated for. Their first meeting was in the grand living room, floor-to-ceiling windows revealing the glittering sprawl of Seoul's night. His men lined the walls like shadows in expensive suits, their presence designed to intimidate, to establish the hierarchy. Changmin stood in the center, a wall of tailored black and coiled power, his chest tattoo visible beneath his partially unbuttoned shirt, a dragon whose tail disappeared beneath the fabric, a symbol everyone in his world recognized. When Keisha was brought before him, she kept her eyes fixed on the marble floor. Irritation flared hot and sharp in his chest. "Look at me," he commanded, his voice low but cutting through the silence like a blade. She flinched barely, but he caught it. Then slowly, with visible effort, she lifted her gaze. Her eyes were deep brown, warm and wide, and in their depths he saw not calculation or defiance, but pure, unguarded fear. It was so raw, so genuine, that it disrupted his entire frame of reference. This was no seasoned player. This was not a woman who understood the rules of his world. This was a terrified girl. The wedding was a performance for enemies and allies alike. The venue was breathtaking, a private rooftop overlooking the Han River, decorated with white orchids and soft lights. Important people filled the space, their smiles sharp and their eyes sharper. Changmin played his part flawlessly, the powerful groom going through the motions with bored efficiency. But when he took Keisha's hand to slide the ring onto her finger, he felt it. A fine, constant tremor ran through her entire body, a vibration of terror she couldn't control. Her skin was ice cold despite the warm summer night. She kept her eyes downcast, her long lashes casting shadows on her cheeks, one hand periodically rising to cover half her face, an unconscious gesture of hiding. She whispered her vows so quietly he had to lean closer to hear, her breath catching on the word forever. He felt something twist uncomfortably in his chest. This was wrong. This delicate, trembling woman did not belong in his ruthless world. The reception blurred into a parade of false congratulations and calculated conversations. Keisha stood beside him like a beautiful statue, silent and still. She didn't eat. She barely touched the champagne placed in her hand. Changmin found his attention drifting back to her again and again, his initial irritation slowly morphing into something else, a prickling, unwelcome sense of protectiveness he didn't understand and didn't want. Who was this girl? Why was she so afraid? Finally, the endless evening concluded. The last guest departed, and the heavy door of his penthouse suite closed behind them with a soft, final click. They were alone. The air in the spacious living room felt thick, charged. Beyond the windows, Seoul glittered like scattered diamonds, the city lights reflecting off the glass surfaces of neighboring towers. Keisha stood frozen in the center of the room, her arms wrapped tightly around herself as if she were standing at the edge of a precipice, waiting to fall. Chang Min poured himself whiskey, the amber liquid catching the light. He studied her over the rim of the glass, his expression unreadable. This was the moment. This was what the contract stipulated. This was the transaction to be completed. This is how it will be, he said, his tone flat, businesslike. He set the glass down with a sharp clink on the marble counter. You are my wife in name. Now you will be my wife in truth. It is part of our agreement. He moved toward her, not with passion, but with purpose. He was a man accustomed to taking what was his, to completing what he started. As he approached, the fear in her eyes didn't just linger. It exploded. The suite was quiet, almost reverent. The only sound the distant hum of Seoul's nightlife filtering through the reinforced glass. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sprawled like a constellation, each light a tiny world unaware of the moment unfolding in this tower. Chang Min stood before her, his movements deliberate as he reached up to unbutton his shirt. The fabric parted slowly, revealing the intricate dragon tattoo that sprawled across his chest, black ink that seemed to move in the low light, scales and claws that marked him as someone who belonged to a world of violence and power. He expected compliance. He expected her to understand that this was simply the next step in their arrangement. Instead, Keisha backed up, her movement sudden and instinctive, like a cornered animal. Her spine hit the edge of a low table, and she gasped, her hands coming up defensively in front of her chest. Her eyes were wide, glassy with unshed tears, her breath coming in short, shallow bursts that made her shoulders rise and fall rapidly. Please, she whispered, the word barely audible. Chang Min paused, his hands stilling on the last button. Please what? His voice was low, controlled, but underneath ran a current of confusion. Why was she reacting like this? Her voice broke. She swallowed hard, trying again. I've never done this before. He frowned, taking another step toward her. Never been married? I know that. The contract specified. No. The word came out choked, desperate. Her whole body was trembling now, visible even from where he stood. I've never been with anyone. Ever. The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment Chang Min didn't process them. Never been with anyone in this arrangement? Never been with someone like him? And then, like pieces of a puzzle sliding into devastating clarity, he understood. She is a virgin. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw everything he'd missed. The way she held herself, arms crossed over her body like armor that had never been breached. The raw, untouched innocence in her panicked expression, the way she was bracing herself, eyes squeezed partially shut, as if waiting for pain, for brutality, for something she'd heard about but never experienced. Her terror wasn't calculation. It wasn't manipulation. It was real. Absolutely. Devastatingly real. Chang Min had built his empire on reading people, on seeing through lies and detecting weakness. He knew every trick, every deception, every angle someone might use to gain advantage. But this raw, honest vulnerability was something he had no framework for understanding. He had prepared for negotiation, perhaps even resistance, but not for this trembling surrender of someone who had no idea what was about to happen to her. He had thought he was claiming a knowing asset, someone who understood the transaction. Instead, he had been given something precious and terrifyingly fragile. His hand, which had been reaching toward her shoulder to pull her closer, suddenly gentled. His fingers, which could break bones and pull triggers without hesitation, became soft, uncertain, then still. He looked down at his own hand as if it belonged to someone else, and then, in a moment that seemed to shock his own body, he stepped back, one step, then another. The hard set of his jaw softened. The cold, businesslike determination that had driven him all day evaporated like smoke, leaving behind something he hadn't felt in years, shame. And beneath that, something even more dangerous, protectiveness. This changed everything. To proceed now would not be claiming what was contractually his. It would be destruction. It would be taking something beautiful and rare simply because he could, simply because a piece of paper said he had the right. He reached up and began rebuttoning his shirt, his movements slow, deliberate. Each button felt like a choice, a decision being made in real time. Keisha watched him through tear-filled eyes, confused, not understanding what was happening. When his shirt was fully buttoned again, he turned away from her, unable to look at her face any longer. He ran a hand through his dark hair, his breath unsteady. "I will not touch you," he said, his voice rough, the words seeming to come from somewhere deep inside him that he didn't recognize. "Not tonight. Not ever unless you ask me to." The silence that followed was absolute. Keisha stood frozen, her hands still raised defensively, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. The feared Mafia king had just walked away. Changmin moved to the door, his stride measured, controlled, though everything inside him felt chaotic. He paused with his hand on the doorframe, his back still to her. He couldn't look at her. If he looked at her, he might change his mind, might convince himself that contracts were contracts and business was business. "The room is yours," he said quietly. "Sleep. I won't disturb you." Then he was gone, pulling the door shut behind him with a soft click that seemed to echo in the vast space. Keisha stood alone in the bedroom, her body still braced for an assault that never came. Slowly, as if her legs could no longer support her, she sank to the floor, the thick carpet soft beneath her. She buried her face in her hands, not crying from pain but trembling with the shock of a reprieve she had never dared to hope for. On the other side of the door, Changmin leaned his back against the wall, his head tilted up toward the ceiling. His own breath was ragged, unsteady. The image of her small, terrified shaking was burned into his mind. He, a man who commanded fear across 3 countries, had been undone by a single tear on her cheek. His study beckoned, cold and familiar, but it felt alien now. The contract that sat on his desk, which had seemed so clear and logical just hours ago, now felt like something vile. He hadn't married a partner, he hadn't acquired an asset, he had accepted a sacrifice. The thought made him sick. For the first time in his adult life, Changmin Li, king of Seoul's underworld, man of blood and power, felt the sharp, uncomfortable sting of shame. Morning came too bright, too cheerful, an insult to the turmoil that had filled the penthouse throughout the sleepless night. Keisha woke, curled on the floor beside the bed, still in her wedding dress, her body stiff and sore. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then it all came flooding back: the ceremony, the terror, his approach, and then his retreat. She sat up slowly, her mind spinning with questions. Would he be angry now? Would he demand what he had chosen not to take last night? Would this morning bring punishment for her fear? She changed into simple clothes she found in the walk-in closet. Expensive items that had been purchased for her, tags still attached, in exactly her size. Someone had prepared for her arrival with meticulous care. She dressed in dark jeans and a soft sweater, pulling her curls into a ponytail, steeling herself for whatever came next. When she finally gathered the courage to leave the bedroom, she crept down the hallway, her footsteps silent on the polished floors. She expected to find him at the massive dining table she'd glimpsed the night before, surrounded by his men, conducting business while she was summoned like an afterthought. Instead, she found him alone on the terrace. The morning sun streamed across a small table set for 2, overlooking the sprawling gardens far below. Changmin stood when he saw her approaching, a gesture so unexpectedly formal it stopped her in her tracks. "Good morning," he said, his voice quieter than she'd ever heard it. It wasn't soft. Changmin Li would never be soft, but it was controlled, careful, the tone of a man actively trying to be something he wasn't naturally. "Good morning," Keisha whispered back, her eyes fixed on the delicate floral pattern of the tablecloth, unable to meet his gaze. He moved to pull out her chair, the gesture so old-fashioned and courteous that it shocked her more than his anger would have. She sat carefully, feeling the weight of his presence as he settled across from her. Breakfast was already laid out: fresh fruit, warm bread, eggs prepared 3 different ways, coffee and tea. It was beautiful and untouched. They sat in heavy silence, but it wasn't hostile. It was something else. Uncertain. New. He didn't demand. He didn't accuse. He simply let her be. Keisha picked at her food, hyper-aware of every movement he made. He ate slowly, methodically, occasionally glancing at her but never staring. When she reached for the teapot, he moved it closer without a word. When she needed honey, he slid it across the table before she could ask. Small gestures, thoughtful ones. After breakfast, she expected him to leave, to retreat into his world of dangerous business and ruthless decisions. Instead, he surprised her again. "The penthouse is large," he said, not quite looking at her. "It's easy to get lost. I could show you around, if you want." It wasn't a command. It was an offer, a question hanging in the air between them. Keisha found herself nodding, curiosity overriding fear. They walked through his domain, and it was nothing like she expected. He moved slowly, adjusting his long strides to match her smaller steps. He didn't touch her, maintaining a respectful distance that felt intentional. He pointed out rooms with the same careful tone he'd used at breakfast: the library, the gym, the office where she should never enter without permission. "This floor is safe," he explained, gesturing to the living areas. "My men won't come here without being summoned. You can move freely." In the library, he paused by floor-to-ceiling windows. "You mentioned you're a photographer?" She nodded, surprised he remembered. "The light here is good in the afternoons. he said simply. They found themselves in the rooftop garden eventually, and Keisha's breath caught. It was beautiful manicured trees, a small koi pond, strategically placed benches that overlooked the city. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of jasmine. "Why didn't you?" she started, then stopped, the question too big to finish. But Changmin understood. He was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes fixed on the skyline. "Your fear," he said finally, his voice low. "It shook me. I've seen fear before I've caused it. But yours was different. You weren't afraid because you knew what I could do. You were afraid because you didn't know what was coming, and I realized." He paused, his jaw tightening. "I realized I couldn't be the one to teach you that fear was justified." Keisha stared at him, seeing him clearly for the first time. Not the Mafia king, not the tattooed monster from stories, just a man, complicated and conflicted, trying to navigate something he didn't understand. "Thank you," she whispered. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something passed between them, fragile and new, but real. "You're safe here," he said. "I meant what I said last night," and for the first time since she'd arrived in Seoul, Keisha believed it. Over the following days, a rhythm developed. Breakfasts on the terrace, quiet conversations about safe things, books, music, the city below. He taught her how to navigate the security systems, how to call for help if she needed it. Which of his men she could trust absolutely. It was the gentlest he had ever been with anyone in his life, and it terrified him. A week passed before Keisha told him the truth. They were in the rooftop garden again, the space that had become their neutral ground. Evening was falling across Seoul, painting the sky in shades of amber and violet. Keisha sat on a stone bench, her camera in her lap, having just photographed the sunset. Changmin stood nearby, hands in his pockets, watching her more than the view. She'd been quiet all day, withdrawn in a way that set his instincts on alert. Something was weighing on her, pulling her down into herself. "Why did you agree to this?" he asked suddenly, the question that had been burning in him since their wedding night. "To marry me?" Keisha's hand stilled on her camera. She set it aside carefully, as if buying time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "My father is a good man," she began, her eyes fixed on the koi pond. "A photographer, like me. He taught me everything I know, but he's not. Careful. With money, with people, with promises." She wrapped her arms around herself, a protective gesture he'd come to recognize. He borrowed money from the wrong people. A lot of money. In Kingston, there are men who... Her voice broke. She took a breath, steadied herself. "There are men who don't ask twice for repayment. They came to our house. They said my father owed them, and if he couldn't pay with money, they'd take something else." Changmin's jaw tightened, a cold fury building in his chest. "They threatened you." "My younger brothers," she corrected, her voice shaking now. "Jamal is 17. Marcus is 15. They're good kids, they play football, they want to go to university. These men said if the debt wasn't cleared, my brothers would disappear. They'd be put to work, doing things." She couldn't finish the sentence. "And then my men arrived," Changmin said quietly, the pieces falling into place. Keisha nodded. "I was working at a gallery opening downtown. I saw something I shouldn't have a meeting, an exchange. One of your men noticed me. I thought I was dead." She finally looked at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Instead, they offered a solution. Marry you. 6 months. In exchange, my family's debts would be erased. They'd be protected, and I'd be safe. They said it was an honor." She laughed bitterly at that last word. "What choice did I have? Let my brothers be taken? Let my mother watch her sons disappear? Or marry a stranger and pray he'd keep his word?" The silence that followed was heavy, weighted with truth. Changmin turned away from her, his hands clenching into fists. He'd thought her family had sold her for influence, for money, for a chance at power. Instead, she'd been offered up as a sacrifice to save the people she loved. She hadn't been bought. She'd been surrendered. "You're brave," he said finally, his voice rough. "I'm terrified," she corrected. "Every day, every moment." He turned back to her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. It wasn't pity. It wasn't sympathy. It was respect, raw and genuine. "Your brothers," he said. "What are their names again?" "Jamal and Marcus." "Why?" "I want to know the names of the boys whose sister was strong enough to face her fear to save them." Keisha felt something crack open in her chest, something that had been frozen and protected for so long. This dangerous man with his tattoos and his empire of shadows was looking at her like she was the bravest person he'd ever met. In the days that followed, Changmin found himself watching her differently. He'd always noticed her the way she moved, the softness of her voice, but now he saw her completely. She wasn't just beautiful. She was extraordinary. He watched her photograph the city from different angles, her whole face transforming when she looked through the lens. He watched the way she tiptoed past his men in the hallways, still nervous but growing braver. He watched her curl up in the library with books about Korean history, trying to understand the world she'd been thrust into. Her innocence didn't make her weak. It made her resilient. Her fear didn't diminish her courage. It amplified it. And somewhere in those quiet observations, in the accumulation of small moments, Chungmin Lee feared King of Seoul's underworld fell. He fell first. And he fell hard. He found himself wanting to hear her laugh, to see her smile without the shadow of fear behind it. He started leaving small things where she'd find them, a book she'd mentioned wanting, fresh flowers for the vase in her room, a new camera lens that would work better for night photography. His men noticed. They didn't say anything, they knew better, but he caught their glances, the way they exchanged looks when he softened his voice around her, when he rearranged his entire schedule just to have breakfast with her on the terrace. Yoon, his second in command, finally dared to speak. "You're different with her." Changmin didn't deny it. "She's different from anyone I've ever known." "Is that wise?" "She's here temporarily. 6 months. Changmin's expression hardened. "That contract was written before I knew who she was. And now? Now everything has changed." Late one night, unable to sleep, Changmin stood in his study reviewing security reports when he heard soft footsteps in the hallway. He found Keisha in the kitchen, making tea, wearing an oversized sweater that fell past her hands. "Can't sleep?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "I keep thinking about home. About whether they're really safe." Without thinking, he made a decision. He pulled out his phone, made 2 calls in rapid Korean, then turned to her. "By tomorrow, your brothers will have around-the-clock security. Discreet, but present. Your mother, too. They won't even know they're being watched, but they'll be protected." Keisha's eyes filled with tears. "Why would you do that?" "Because I'm falling in love with you," he thought. "Because your courage deserves to be rewarded. Because protecting the people you love is the least I can do." But what he said was, "Because you shouldn't have to worry." And in that moment, something shifted between them again, deeper than before, more permanent. The second week of their marriage marked a turning point. Changmin began integrating Keisha into his daily routine in small, careful ways. Breakfast on the terrace became non-negotiable. His men learned quickly not to schedule anything before 9. Evenings often found them on the rooftop garden, watching the city lights flicker to life as twilight descended. He taught her about Seoul, pointing out landmarks from their high vantage point. "That tower there, that's where I signed my first major deal. I was 23 and scared I'd fail." The admission surprised them both. "Did you?" Keisha asked. "Almost. But fear can be useful if you don't let it paralyze you." She looked at him thoughtfully. "Is that what you think of me? That I'm paralyzed?" "No," he said immediately. "I think you're the bravest person I've ever met. You walked into a nightmare to save your family. That's not paralysis. That's love." The romantic tension between them built slowly, subtly, like water rising. It was in the small moments, hands brushing as he passed her a coffee cup, his fingers lingering just a second too long, sharing the elevator ride down to the parking garage, the silence heavy with awareness. Long looks across the dinner table when he thought she wasn't watching, and her stolen glances when she thought he wasn't paying attention. Her smiles came easier now, less shadowed by fear. She started asking questions about his world, genuinely curious rather than just trying to survive. He found himself answering honestly, sharing pieces of himself he'd never revealed to anyone. His men noticed the change too. Yoon commented quietly one morning, "You laugh now. I haven't heard you laugh in 5 years." "She makes me want to," Changmin admitted. The guards who'd initially seen Keisha as a temporary complication began treating her with genuine respect. She learned their names, asked about their families, brought them coffee when they stood post in the cold. They responded by being even more vigilant, more protective. "She's one of us now," Changmin overheard one guard tell another. "The boss's lady. We protect her with our lives." One evening, 3 weeks into their marriage, they stood on the rooftop under a sky scattered with stars barely visible through Seoul's light pollution. The city sprawled below them, a living organism of light and sound. The warm wind carried the scent of the jasmine that grew in large planters around the garden space. Keisha turned to him suddenly, her expression serious. "Why did you choose me?" "Really? You could have married anyone." Changmin was quiet for a long moment, weighing his answer. He'd learned that Keisha deserved honesty, even when it was uncomfortable. "I thought you would be easy to control," he admitted, his voice low. "A foreigner, no connections to Korean politics, no family here to interfere. I thought you'd be grateful, maybe intimidated, but ultimately, manageable." "And now?" she asked softly. He turned to face her fully, his dark eyes intense in the dim light. Now I know I was wrong about everything. You're not manageable. You're not predictable. He struggled for words. You're extraordinary. And terrifying. Terrifying? A small smile played at her lips. You make me feel things I've spent 20 years training myself not to feel. You make me question decisions I've already made. You make me want. He stopped himself. Want what? Things I have no right to want. The air between them felt electric. Keisha's heart hammered in her chest. She knew she should step back, maintain the safe distance they'd carefully constructed. Instead, she took a half step closer. What if I want you to want those things? She whispered. Changmin's breath caught. For a moment, he looked like a man balanced on a knife's edge, torn between restraint and desire. Then slowly, carefully, he reached up and tucked a loose curl behind her ear, his fingers barely grazing her skin. Don't say that unless you mean it, he said roughly. I mean it. Their honesty was deepening their bond, creating something neither of them had planned for. Changmin found himself sharing stories from his childhood, the uncle who'd raised him after his parents died, the first time he'd had to make an impossible choice, the loneliness of leadership that never quite went away. Keisha shared her dreams of opening her own photography studio, her memories of her grandmother who'd raised her to be strong, her fear that she'd never be brave enough to live the life she wanted. You're already brave enough, he told her one night. You're here, aren't you? I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice. You chose to save your family. You chose to face your fear. You chose to trust me, even when every instinct probably told you not to. She studied him in the low light. Do you know what I see when I look at you? A monster? He suggested, his tone self-deprecating. A man who pretends to be a monster because it's safer than being hurt. The observation struck him like a physical blow. No one had ever seen him that clearly. As April gave way to May, something between them shifted fundamentally. They moved around each other like binary stars, caught in each other's gravity but not yet colliding. Every conversation brought them closer. Every shared meal, every quiet evening, every moment of unexpected laughter built something that felt inevitable. One night, Keisha fell asleep on the library sofa, a book open on her chest. Changmin found her there and stood watching her for a long moment, memorizing the peaceful expression on her face. Carefully, so carefully, he draped a blanket over her and dimmed the lights. As he turned to leave, her sleepy voice stopped him. Thank you. For what? For being kind. For being patient. For being you. He didn't trust himself to respond. He simply nodded and left before she could see how profoundly her words affected him. Later, alone in his room, he stood at the window overlooking the city he ruled and admitted the truth he'd been running from. He was in love with her. Completely, irrevocably, dangerously in love. And he had no idea what to do about it. Are you feeling this connection between Changmin and Keisha? If you're loving this story, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me which moment has touched you most. My friend bet me I couldn't build a community here. Let's prove them wrong together. Now, let's see what happens when their feelings can no longer be denied. The threat came on a Tuesday morning, delivered in the form of a single photograph slipped under the door of the penthouse. Changmin's blood ran cold when he saw it. The image showed Keisha's mother outside their home in Kingston, captured in sharp detail. Her younger brothers were visible in the background, laughing as they kicked a football in the yard. Someone had drawn a red X over each of their faces. The message was clear. We know where they are. We can reach them. Yoon appeared at Changmin's shoulder, his expression grim. It came through the mailroom. No return address, no prints. Professional. The Jamaican gang? Changmin's voice was deadly quiet. The calm before a storm. Most likely. Our sources say they're angry about the debt being forgiven. They see it as a loss of face. Changmin's hands clenched around the photograph, crumpling it. They think they can threaten what's mine? What do you want us to do? Everything. The single word contained a universe of violence. Find them. Find every single person connected to this. I want names, locations, family trees. I want to know what they eat for breakfast. Yoon nodded sharply and left to make the arrangements. Changmin stood alone in his study, staring at the ruined photograph. For years, he'd operated with cold calculation, measuring risk against reward, violence against benefit. But now, thinking of Keisha's face when she learned her family was in danger, thinking of the fear that would return to her eyes after weeks of it slowly fading, now it was personal. He found her in the library, sunlight streaming through the windows as she edited photos on her laptop. She looked up when he entered, her smile fading as she read his expression. What's wrong? He should have found a gentle way to tell her. He should have softened the blow. Instead, he showed her the photograph. The color drained from her face. No, you promised they'd be safe. They are safe, he said firmly. kneeling in front of her chair so they were eye level. I have 6 men watching them right now. Nothing has happened to them. Nothing will happen to them. You don't know that. Yes, I do. His voice was steel wrapped in silk. Because I'm going to eliminate the threat completely. Keisha saw something in his eyes then that she'd only glimpsed before the darkness he commanded. The ruthless power that made grown men afraid. For the first time, she saw the Mafia King in full, terrible clarity. And instead of fear, she felt safe. Can you really protect them? She whispered. Watch me. Over the next 3 days, Keisha witnessed a side of Chang Min she'd heard about but never seen. He transformed from the patient, gentle man who had breakfast with her each morning into something else entirely, a commander orchestrating a campaign with surgical precision, his penthouse filled with hard-faced men who spoke in clipped Korean. Phones rang constantly. Computer screens displayed information in rapid succession. Through it all, Chang Min remained at the center, coldly directing operations with the focused intensity of a general at war. But even in the midst of this, he made time for her. Every few hours, he'd find her wherever she'd retreated to and simply ask, "Are you okay?" The concern in his eyes was real, cutting through the persona of the ruthless king. "I'm scared," she admitted during one check-in. "Good. Fear keeps you alert. But trust me, Keisha, I won't let anything happen to them." On the 3rd day, Yoon delivered his report in Chang Min's study. Keisha, who had been invited to listen, sat quietly in a corner chair. The gang leader is a man named Desmond Clark. He runs operations out of Kingston's west side. He has 17 men under him, and he's connected to a larger network trafficking drugs and weapons. Connected how? Chang Min asked. They move product through Jamaica to Miami. Our Miami contacts confirm the connection. Chang Min's expression was unreadable. Contact our people in Miami. Tell them the arrangement with Clark's network is terminated immediately. Any product in the pipeline gets seized. Any money owed gets frozen. That will cost them millions, Yoon said. Good. Then contact our people in Kingston. I want Clark to receive a message. He has 24 hours to leave Jamaica permanently. If he or any of his men come within 100 meters of the Robinson family, we'll consider it an act of war. And if he doesn't leave? Chang Min's smile was cold and sharp as a blade. Then we make an example, one that everyone in the Caribbean will remember. Keisha watched this exchange with wide eyes. She was seeing the full scope of his power, the network that spanned continents, the casual way he could destroy lives with a few phone calls. Later, when they were alone, he came to stand beside her at the window. Are you afraid of me now? He asked quietly. She thought about it, really thought about it. No, she said finally. I'm not afraid of you. She struggled for the word. I'm awed by you. You could have just increased security. Instead, you're dismantling an entire criminal network because they threatened my family. They threatened what's mine, he corrected, his voice low and fierce. No one threatens what's mine. Not while I breathe. The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. This wasn't duty. This wasn't about the contract. This was something else entirely. Chang Min, she whispered. I know what you're going to say. That you're only here for 6 months. That this is temporary. That we shouldn't. I was going to say thank you. She reached out tentatively and touched his hand. Thank you for protecting them. For protecting me. He looked down at her hand on his. Such a small gesture but profound in its trust. Slowly, carefully, he turned his palm up and let her fingers settle into his. For a long moment, they simply stood there, hands clasped, looking out at the city neither of them really saw. I would burn the world down for you, he said quietly, almost to himself. That should probably terrify you. It doesn't, she said. It makes me feel like maybe, for the first time in my life, I don't have to be afraid anymore. That night, as promised, Desmond Clark received his message. According to the reports that came back, he and his top lieutenants were on a plane to Venezuela within 12 hours. The gang that had terrorized her family was scattered to the winds, their network in ruins, their reputation destroyed. Chang Min's men in Kingston sent confirmation. The Robinson family was safe. Permanent security had been discreetly established. They would be protected for as long as Chang Min drew breath. When he told Keisha, she cried not from fear this time, but from relief. Without thinking, she threw her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. He froze for half a second, then slowly, carefully, wrapped his arms around her. She was warm and soft and trembling slightly, and holding her felt like the most natural thing in the world. Thank you, she whispered against his shirt. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Always, he promised into her hair. Always. And in that moment, Keisha Robinson began to fall in love with the dangerous man who had moved heaven and earth to keep her family safe. 3 nights after the threat was eliminated, Changmin came to find Keisha in the library. She was curled up in her favorite chair, staring at a book without really reading it. "Come with me," he said simply. She followed him without question, through the penthouse and up a private staircase she'd never noticed before. It led to their rooftop garden. But tonight it was transformed. Soft lights had been strung between the trees, casting a warm glow across the space. The city sprawled below them in all directions, a sea of light stretching to every horizon. "What is this?" she asked, breathless. "I wanted to thank you," he said. "For what?" "You're the one who saved my family. For trusting me. For not being afraid when you saw what I really am." They walked to the edge of the garden, where a bench overlooked the best view of Seoul's skyline. The warm spring wind carried the scent of jasmine and the distant sounds of the city below. It was the exact atmosphere of their wedding photo, the one taken before everything changed. They sat in silence for a while, comfortable now in the quiet between them. Finally, Keisha spoke. "I need to tell you something, okay? I'm afraid of intimacy," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Not just the physical part, though that too. I'm afraid of letting someone see all of me. The weak parts, the scared parts, the parts I'm ashamed of. I'm afraid of trusting someone and then having them leave. Or worse, having them stay but wish they hadn't." She took a shaky breath. "My father, I love him, but he's been disappointing people my whole life. My mother, me, my brothers. He makes promises he can't keep. I watched her heart break 1,000 times, and I swore I'd never let anyone have that kind of power over me." Changmin listened without interrupting, his dark eyes fixed on her profile. "But then you," her voice cracked, "you've been so patient, so kind, and it terrifies me because I'm starting to trust you, and I don't know what happens when the 6 months are over." The silence that followed felt infinite. Then Changmin spoke, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm afraid too." She turned to look at him, surprised. "I'm afraid of gentleness," he continued. "I've never been given it. Not really. My uncle raised me after my parents died, but he was training me to take over the family business. Every kindness came with a lesson. Every moment of softness was followed by a reminder that the world would eat me alive if I showed weakness." He ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture of vulnerability she'd come to recognize. "I learned to be hard, to be cold, to make decisions without feeling them. And it worked. I built this empire, earned respect through fear, survived when others didn't. But somewhere along the way, I forgot how to be anything else." He finally looked at her, and the naked emotion in his eyes made her breath catch. "Then you arrived. Terrified and trembling and so brave it broke something inside me. You made me want to be gentle. You made me want to be the kind of man who deserves someone like you. And that's terrifying because I don't know if I can be that man. I don't know if I know how." Keisha felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "You already are," she whispered. "Every day, every moment. The way you pull out my chair at breakfast. The way you adjust your stride so I can keep up. The way you walked away on our wedding night when you could have just—" She couldn't finish. "I couldn't," he said fiercely. "I will never take from you what isn't freely given." They sat with their confessions hanging in the air between them, two people who'd entered this arrangement expecting survival, not connection. Not this overwhelming, terrifying, beautiful thing growing between them. "I'm falling for you," Keisha said, the admission barely audible. "And it scares me more than anything in my life ever has." "I already fell," Changmin admitted. "Weeks ago. I'm just trying to figure out how to tell you without scaring you away." She laughed, a watery sound halfway between a sob and genuine amusement. "I married a Mafia king. I'm living in a tower surrounded by armed men. But you think your feelings are what's going to scare me? These feelings could destroy us both if we're not careful. Then let's be careful together." The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Then, slowly, hesitantly, Keisha reached out and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and sure and strong. It was a small gesture, a simple touch. But it felt like crossing a threshold they could never uncross. "Tell me something," she said softly. "If there was no contract, if we'd met another way, would you still want this? Want me?" Changmin brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "I'd want you in any world, in any life, under any circumstances. The contract brought you to me, but it's not what keeps me hoping you'll stay." "Stay past the 6 months?" she asked. "Stay forever." The confession hung in the air, raw and honest and impossible to take back. Keisha felt something shift inside her chest, like a lock finally turning. She'd been so focused on surviving these 6 months that she hadn't let herself imagine beyond them. But now, sitting here under the stars with this complicated, dangerous, gentle man, she could see it a future that wasn't just survival but life, real life, Ask me again, she whispered. In 3 months. When the contract ends. Ask me to stay. And if I ask you now? She smiled through her tears. Then I'd say I need to be sure you want me. Not just the idea of me. Not just the virgin you protected or the sacrifice you saved. Me. With all my fears and flaws and broken pieces. I already know all of those, he said. I've been learning them for weeks. Your fear doesn't make you weak, it makes you honest. Your flaws don't diminish you, they make you real. And your broken pieces? He touched her cheek gently. They fit perfectly with mine. The city lights blurred through her tears. Keisha leaned into his touch. This man who'd somehow become her safe harbor in the middle of a storm. I'm going to kiss you now, Changmin said softly. If that's okay. Instead of answering with words, Keisha closed the distance between them. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a question being asked and answered simultaneously. His lips were soft against hers, patient and unhurried. She tasted salt from her own tears, and something uniquely him, expensive cologne and whiskey, and something indefinable that made her heart race. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing unsteadily, everything had changed again. Stay with me tonight, he said. Not like before, not like the wedding night. Just stay. Let me hold you. Let me show you that intimacy doesn't have to mean fear. Keisha nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. They stayed on the rooftop for hours, talking and kissing and simply being together. The city lights faded as dawn approached, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. And when they finally went inside, Keisha fell asleep in Changmin's arms, feeling safer than she'd ever felt in her life. The contract had 3 months left, but both of them knew that what they were building would last far longer than any piece of paper could dictate. 2 weeks passed in a state of building tension, not the fearful kind, but the sweet, anticipatory tension of two people falling deeper with every passing day. Changmin and Keisha existed in a careful space of stolen kisses, held hands, and nights spent talking until dawn broke over Seoul's skyline. He never pushed. He never demanded. Every touch was an invitation she was free to decline, but Keisha found she didn't want to decline. She wanted more. The revelation both thrilled and terrified her. One night, she stood in her room, their room, really, though he'd never claimed it and made a decision. She'd been thinking about it for days, turning it over in her mind, examining it from every angle. The fear was still there, humming beneath her skin like a low electric current. But something else was there too. Something stronger. Trust, desire, love. She pulled on a silk robe over her nightgown, took a breath to steady her nerves, and walked down the hallway to his study. He was still awake, he always was, working late into the night on the endless business of his empire. Soft light spilled from under the door. She raised her hand and knocked. 3 soft taps. Come in. She pushed the door open and found him at his desk, shirt sleeves rolled up, hair slightly disheveled from running his hands through it. He looked up and froze when he saw her, his expression shifting from surprise to concern. Keisha? Is everything okay? She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, gathering courage. I want to talk to you. He stood immediately, moving around the desk toward her. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. She took a breath. I feel safe with you. He stopped a few feet away, giving her space. I'm glad. I want our marriage to be real, she continued, her voice gaining strength. Not in 6 months. Not after the contract ends. Now. I want it to be real now. Changmin's breath caught. Keisha, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. She stepped away from the door, moving closer to him. But on my terms. Slowly. With patience. Can you give me that? I can give you anything, he said roughly. Everything. She reached up, trembling but brave, and touched his face. Her fingers traced the strong line of his jaw, feeling the slight stubble there. He closed his eyes at the contact, as if her touch caused him physical pain. I'm still scared, she admitted. But I'm more scared of letting fear rob me of this. Of you. He covered her hand with his, pressing it more firmly against his cheek. We can stop any time. At any point. You say the word end. She kissed him, cutting off his words. This kiss was different from their previous ones, deeper, more certain, laced with intent. He responded carefully at first, then with growing intensity as she pressed closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. Are you sure? He whispered. I've never been more sure of anything. He took her hand and led her not to her room, but to his, a space she'd never entered. It was simpler than she expected, almost austere. A large bed with dark sheets, minimal furniture, windows overlooking the city. Nothing unnecessary, nothing ornamental. It was the room of a man who didn't know how to be comfortable, until now. He turned to face her, and in the low light, she saw the full depth of his emotion, want, and restraint warring visibly across his features. "Tell me what you need," he said. "You. Just you." What followed was nothing like Keisha had imagined in her fearful fantasies. There was no pain, no brutality, no taking. There was only Chang Min's overwhelming gentleness, his whispered reassurances, his hands trembling slightly as he helped her out of her robe. Every piece of clothing removed came with a question. "Is this okay?" Every touch was preceded by checking her expression. When she tensed, he stopped, waited, let her breathe and adjust, and continue when she was ready. He kissed away her tears, not of pain but of overwhelming emotion. He told her she was beautiful until she believed it. He moved slowly, carefully, giving her time to feel everything without fear overwhelming the sensation. "Look at me," he whispered when the moment came, echoing his command from their first meeting. But this time it was a plea, not an order. She did, and found his dark eyes full of such tenderness it stole her breath. The experience was transformative, not because it was physically perfect. There were awkward moments, nervous laughs, adjustments and reassurances, but because it was emotionally complete, because she chose it, because he honored that choice with every breath, every touch, every whispered word. Afterward, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his fingers trailing through her curls. "I love you," he said into the darkness. "I know it's too soon. I know the contract says this is temporary. I know. I love you too," she interrupted. "I think I have for a while. I was just too scared to admit it." He tightened his arms around her, as if afraid she might disappear. "You're not scared anymore?" "Oh, I'm terrified," she said honestly. "But being scared doesn't mean I'm wrong about this. About us." They talked for hours, sharing pieces of themselves they'd never shared with anyone. He told her about the first man he'd killed, the weight of it, the way it changed him. She told him about the night her father gambled away their rent money and she'd had to comfort her crying mother. They shared scars and secrets and dreams they'd thought were impossible. As dawn broke over Seoul once again, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Keisha felt something she'd never felt before, complete peace. "Don't let me go," she whispered sleepily. "Never," he promised. "Not even if you ask me to." She smiled against his chest and let sleep claim her, safe in the arms of the most dangerous man in Seoul and the gentlest soul she'd ever known. Morning light filtered through the curtains, soft and golden. Keisha woke slowly, aware of warmth surrounding her, strong arms holding her close, the steady rhythm of breathing that wasn't her own. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then it all came flooding back last night. Her choice, the overwhelming gentleness of the man still sleeping beside her. She tilted her head to look at Changmin's face, relaxed in sleep in a way it never was during waking hours. The hard lines of command and control were softened, making him look younger, almost vulnerable. She wanted to memorize this moment, this version of him that only she got to see. His eyes opened, dark and immediately alert. Then they focused on her, and something in his expression softened completely. "Good morning," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "Good morning." They lay there for a while, neither moving, just existing in this peaceful bubble before the world intruded. Then Changmin shifted, pressing a kiss to her forehead before carefully extracting himself from the bed. "Stay here," he said. "I'll be right back." He pulled on pants and disappeared into his study. Keisha sat up, pulling the sheet around herself, suddenly nervous without understanding why. Everything felt different this morning, not bad, just weighted with significance. When he returned, he carried a folder, the same folder she'd seen on his desk weeks ago, the marriage contract. Her heart stuttered. Was he going to enforce terms now? Remind her of the agreement? Tell her that last night didn't change the fundamental nature of their arrangement? He sat on the edge of the bed, the folder in his hands. His expression was serious, unreadable. "Changmin?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. He opened the folder and pulled out the contract pages of legal language in both English and Korean. Their signatures at the bottom, official stamps marking it as binding. Keisha's throat tightened. "What are you doing?" Instead of answering, he took the contract in both hands and tore it in half. The sound of ripping paper seemed impossibly loud in the quiet room. He tore it again, and again, until the contract that had brought them together was nothing but pieces scattered across the bed like confetti. "You are not bound to me by fear," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You are not here because of a piece of paper or an obligation or a debt your father owed. You are my wife because I choose you, because I love you, because I cannot imagine my life without you in it." Tears spilled down Keisha's cheeks. "But the 6 months. Forget the 6 months. Forget the contract. Forget every rule we started with." He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away her tears. I want you to stay. Not because you have to, but because you want to. And if you don't want to, if you want to leave, I'll make sure you and your family are protected for the rest of your lives. No strings, no obligations. You'd let me go? She whispered. I'd hate every second of it. But yes, because loving you means giving you a choice. Always. Keisha looked at the torn pieces of contract scattered around them, the document that had seemed so final, so absolute, now reduced to nothing. Freedom. He was offering her complete freedom, and all she wanted was to stay. I choose you, she said, her voice steady despite the tears. I choose this. I choose us. He kissed her then, deep and thorough, and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, she was smiling through her tears. I have something else for you, he said, pulling out his phone and making a quick call in Korean. Then he looked at her, something almost nervous in his expression. Get dressed. There's someone I want you to meet. 20 minutes later, they stood in the penthouse's main living area. Keisha had barely finished pulling on jeans and a sweater when she heard the elevator chime. The doors opened, and her brothers came running out. Keisha. Jamal, 17 and tall, reached her first, lifting her off her feet in a bear hug. Marcus was right behind him, both boys talking over each other. You're really okay. This place is insane. We flew first class. Mom's so worried. Keisha was crying again. But these were tears of pure joy. She hugged them both, breathing in the familiar scent of home, feeling their solid presence and knowing they were safe. Behind them, her mother emerged from the elevator, moving slower, her eyes wide as she took in the penthouse. When she saw Keisha, her face crumpled. Baby girl. Mama. They embraced. And Keisha felt like a child again, small and safe and loved. Finally, her mother pulled back and looked at Changmin, who stood a respectful distance away, watching the reunion with quiet satisfaction. You're the one who saved them, her mother said. It wasn't a question. Changmin bowed slightly, a gesture of respect. I'm the one who loves your daughter, Mrs. Robinson. Protecting your family was the least I could do. Her mother studied him for a long moment, seeing past the tattoos and the expensive clothes to the man beneath. Then she nodded, some tension leaving her shoulders. Thank you. Over breakfast, a massive spread prepared by Changmin's staff, Keisha's brothers peppered them both with questions. Changmin answered patiently, even smiling at some of their more enthusiastic inquiries about Mafia stuff. You'll stay here? He asked Mrs. Robinson. For as long as you want. I've arranged for an apartment nearby if you prefer privacy. But you're welcome in this home always. We can really stay? Marcus asked, his eyes wide. This is your sister's home now, Changmin said, looking at Keisha with such open affection that everyone at the table noticed. Which makes it your home too. I've also arranged for school enrollment if you want to finish your education here, or we can arrange for you to complete your studies in Jamaica with security. Your choice. Jamal and Marcus exchanged glances, excitement building. We could stay in Seoul, if you want to. After breakfast, as her family explored the penthouse with the enthusiasm of tourists, Keisha found Changmin on their rooftop garden. He stood at the railing, looking out over the city he ruled. She slipped her arms around him from behind, resting her cheek against his back. Thank you, she said. For all of this. For them. He turned in her embrace, pulling her close. You sacrificed everything for them. I wanted to give you something back. You gave me everything, she corrected. Safety, trust, love, a future I never thought I'd have. He kissed the top of her head. We gave each other everything. Below them, Seoul sprawled in all directions, a city of millions, a world of danger and beauty and possibility. But up here, in this garden high above it all, they'd built something that transcended contracts and obligations. They'd built love. So what happens now? Keisha asked, her voice soft. Changmin smiled, a real smile that transformed his whole face. Now we live, together, for as long as you'll have me. Forever then, she said. I'll have you forever. Forever, he agreed. And in the warm Seoul morning, surrounded by the city lights that never quite faded, Changmin Lee and Keisha Robinson began their life together not as a business arrangement, not as a contract marriage, but as partners who'd chosen each other freely. Their marriage had started as a shield against danger, a transaction meant to protect and preserve. But it had become something neither of them expected. A love story that transformed a mafia king into a man who knew gentleness, and a terrified girl into a woman who knew her own strength. The contract was gone, torn to pieces and scattered like the fears they'd conquered. All that remained was choice. And every day, they chose each other. Again and again and again. And that's where their beautiful journey truly begins. If this story touched your heart, please hit that subscribe button. It means the world to me. Drop a comment below telling me which moment made you feel the most. and let me know where you're watching from. Honestly, some people told me I'd never build a real community here, that I'd never reach 5,000 subscribers. Every single one of you who joins proves them wrong, and I'm so grateful. The next story is already waiting for you on your screen, another tale of unexpected love, impossible choices, and hearts that refuse to give up. Click it now, because trust me, you won't want to miss it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for letting me share these stories with you. Until next time, keep believing in love, even when it seems impossible.